What's up, guys? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to episode 24 of The Attachment Confessions. My name is Chelsea, and I truly cannot express how thankful I am that you decided to tune in today. In case you're new to The Attachment Confessions, let me fill you in on what the pod is all about. From the moment I discovered attachment science, everything about every relationship I had ever been in finally made sense. And now I'm figuring out what it takes to earn my attachment security and have the best possible relationships from now on. Here on the Attachment Confessions, we'll be diving into all things attachment science while you guys tag along on my attachment healing adventure. My hope is that by bringing attachment science to those of you who have never heard of it before, and by sharing my own story, you'll also be inspired to set out on your own attachment healing journey. Earning your attachment security is 100% possible. So if having the best relationships of your life is your goal, just like it is mine, you're in the right place. And for those of you who have been tuning into the attachment confessions and continuously coming back, first of all, thank you so much. I seriously could not do this without y'all's continued love and support. And if you've had any aha attachment moments, please take a quick minute to leave a rating and review. It really does make such a huge difference in helping others discover this podcast. Also, as a prologue for today's episode, I wanted to remind you all of the incredibly exciting new partnership between the Attachment Confessions and world renowned attachment expert Dr. Sarah Hensley. Listeners of this podcast can use the promo code Chelsea10 at thelovedoc.com to receive 10% off any of Dr. Hensley's life-changing attachment healing programs and services. Today's topic will probably hit super close to a lot of you, so I just want to preface things by letting you know before we get into the nitty-gritty that there's always hope. And Dr. Hensley's programs are seriously a gift from above for anybody or any relationship who finds themselves in the painful midst of what we'll be diving into today. Again, that's Chelsea10, spelled CHELSEA10 to get 10% off any of Dr. Hensley's services. I promise you will not regret it. Also, be sure to stick around to the end because I'll be sharing a sneak peek at our next episode, which I am so excited to bring to you guys. All right, friends. So, as you can tell from this episode's title, we're going to get into what is by far the most painful relationship dynamic when it comes to attachment styles: the fearful avoidant and the dismissive avoidant. Unfortunately, I know this combo all too well. My previous FADA relationship gradually going up in flames was a big inspiration for me starting the Attachment Confessions in the first place. This relationship combination truly is the clash of the avoidants. And today, we're going to get into why exactly when these two attachment styles team up, they have the highest probability of their love eventually burning to the ground. And as a fearful avoidant, I've been on both sides of this dynamic throughout my own relationships. At times, the avoidant one running, other times, the anxious one desperately chasing. And let me tell you, neither side is fun. Now, if you haven't yet listened to the deep dive episodes I recently did on the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant, I encourage you to hit pause on this episode and listen to those two deep dives first, because those episodes will give you a ton of context and help set the stage for today's episode. First, let's talk about the initial electric attraction that the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant often experience toward one another at the beginning stages of their relationship. We all know the phrase opposites attract. Well, there actually is a science behind this phenomenon, which can be explained by none other than the science of attachment. As you'll recall, the fearful avoidant attachment is formed in childhood due to experiencing trauma from one or both of their parents. Because of this, FAs crave closeness while simultaneously fearing it. They're full of resiliency, emotional depth, and empathy. They have high emotional intelligence. They're deeply in tune with their emotions and the emotions of those around them. This is because of the hypervigilance they developed in childhood, which was a mechanism to protect themselves from possible danger. This shaped their primary attachment need of being seen, heard, and understood. But they don't only want to be seen, heard, and understood themselves, they have a deep desire to know and understand others, which, of course, is revved up even higher for their romantic partner. It's almost as if FAs subconsciously feel a duty to live out their primary attachment need. They constantly go about their lives monitoring their feelings and the perceived feelings of others in order to create closeness and maintain safety. As for the dismissive avoidant, their attachment style is formed in childhood due to emotional neglect. Because of this, the DA develops a deep defectiveness wound around emotional vulnerability. They feel completely unsafe exposing the depths of their soul, which is in total contrast to the fearful avoidant. The DA's goal is to make life light, fun, carefree, and spontaneous. They don't sweat the small stuff. They often come across as stable, consistent, stoic, even mysterious at times. So here's the thing. In essence, the dismissive avoidant has everything that the fearful avoidant lacks, and vice versa. The initial attraction and chemistry between these two can be explained by having a magnetic pull toward what is known as their shadow self, the pieces of themselves they've been conditioned to believe are wrong or shameful, yet the other person seems to emulate and express with ease. For example, at the beginning of a relationship, the dismissive avoidant is highly attracted to the openness, empathy, and emotional depth of the fearful avoidant because those characteristics are the pieces of them they feel shame around and often don't even know how to channel because they've been conditioned to hide those deeper emotions from the people they should have been most comfortable sharing those pieces with. But the fearful avoidant makes them feel as though it's okay, even encouraged, to reveal those hidden parts of themselves, which initially feels really good to them during the dopamine high of the honeymoon phase. They feel accepted instead of shamed for having feelings when things are still new, exciting, and considered low stakes with their partner. DAs will often come across as open and vulnerable at first, before their attachment wounds have been triggered. But really, they're just being transparent. Vulnerability and transparency are two different things. Transparency is the DA's way of talking about hard things that have happened to them, but without going that deeper layer of expressing how those things made them feel or affected them. They can be very matter of fact without being vulnerable. Their transparency can seem like they're opening up, but really, they're giving just enough insight without actually allowing themselves to fully feel exposed because feelings are a sign of weakness to the DA. Now, from the fearful avoidance point of view, they're initially extremely attracted to the perceived calm steadiness of the dismissive avoidant because this is totally opposite of the intense emotions FAs feel within their own bodies. As you'll recall, fearful avoidants feel their emotions very deeply, high highs and low lows, very much like an emotional roller coaster internally, and sometimes externally too, depending on if they tend to lean more on the anxious or the avoidant side of their attachment. If they naturally lean more avoidant, they're going to internalize their intense emotions. But if they naturally lean more anxious, they will externalize their emotions. The dismissive avoidant couldn't be more opposite, and that perceived emotional stability of the DA feels really foreign, but in a safe, almost relieving way to the fearful avoidant. This is also because it's very common for fearful avoidants to be, unfortunately, naturally attracted to narcissists. Often, the next relationship FAs get into after breaking free from a narcissist is with a dismissive avoidant because the DA's cool, calm, collected demeanor is exactly what the FA's nervous system searches for after experiencing the manipulation and mind games from a narcissist. Check out my previous episodes on narcissism for more on that. So, at the beginning of the FA-DA relationship, the way that each of them handles and expresses their emotions, or doesn't, is quite frankly bewildering to the other, but in the best way possible. It's like they both could use a little bit of what the other has. The FA could stand to take a chill pill, and the DA could stand to feel and express their emotions more. As a healing, fearful avoidant myself, let me paint this picture for you using my own lived experience with my dismissive avoidant ex. When he and I first got together, well, and technically, this was our second time dating with like 15 ish years in between our first rodeo and our second attempt at things. So, when he reappeared into my life all those years later, I was fresh out of an extremely toxic 10-year relationship with someone who was highly anxious, among other things. My nervous system was in a functional freeze state, aka survival mode. I was so relieved to be free. The last thing I was looking for was a relationship. In fact, I jokingly, but not really joking, told everyone I was officially going to become a nun and live in peaceful solitude until the day I die. I was literally so happy to be alone. Just me, myself, and I. Well, the DA from 15 years prior was my self admitted one that got away. So if anybody was going to convince me to give love another shot, it was only going to be him, which I certainly never figured would actually happen. But what do you know? There he was, my one that got away, chilling in my DMs like 2 months post breakup. It felt like fate, like the stars were finally aligning. This was my reward for the decade of hell I just went through with the anxious covert narcissist. At the time, I knew nothing about attachment styles. I just knew that this out of the blue, resurrected relationship could not have been more of a 180 from the one I'd just been set free of. And my fearful avoidant nervous system felt the cool, calm, consistent, feathers never ruffled nervous system of my rekindled dismissive avoidant as the biggest breath of fresh air humanly imaginable. This man totally swept me off my feet, you guys. He gave me everything I'd always wanted. Told me he'd been waiting all these years for me, that he never stopped loving me, and that he was going to save me from my old life and give me everything I never had. Looking back, that's what I now know as love bombing. And from somebody else, all of those premature promises probably would have activated my avoidance side and scared me away. But since I knew him, I trusted him, which is hard for us FAs, right? I'd put this man up on the highest pedestal in my heart and mind for years. Because of all that, his grand statements and gestures didn't scare me one bit. In fact, they hooked me hard and fast. And I was sure that this time we were destined to be together forever. Finally, my happy ending I had dreamed of for so long was actually happening in real life. I was a magnet to his emotional stability, and he was drawn to my emotional depth. He showed me a life I never imagined, took me to places I'd only ever seen in other people's photos, and was an incredibly hard worker and provider. Everything I'd been missing and always wanted, I finally had. Until I didn't. Thanks to our opposite attachments taking a turn for the worse and crashing into each other beyond what he was willing to repair. So, if everything seems so perfect at first between the FA and the DA, where in the world do things go so terribly wrong? The first sign of trouble happens either when the first big conflict takes place or when the honeymoon phase fizzles out. You know how I said that each attachment is initially attracted to their shadow self? Well, as the relationship progresses, that initial intrigue for their partner's opposite attachment traits becomes a frustration. The dismissive avoidance perceived emotional consistency that the fearful once admired makes the FA feel as though they don't really know their DA partner. Remember, the FA's biggest need is to feel seen, heard, and understood, as well as know and understand their partner. They begin to feel emotionally disconnected and distant because of how surface level the dismissive is. This is something I can definitely relate to in that relationship myself. The FA craves emotional intimacy, and the DA quite literally feels like they are dying if they open up in a vulnerable way. They've been suppressing their emotions since childhood, so they actually don't even know how to access their feelings. The DA's emotional experience is very simple. They're either happy, sad, or mad. The fearful, however, is a very complex emotional feeler. They can name a whole range of emotions depending on the situation: joy, relief, anger, disappointment, misunderstood, unloved, etc. Those emotional experiences of the FA go from being admirable to exhausting for the dismissive avoidant, as their primary need is for peace and harmony. That initial shadow self appeal totally switches. DAs start to feel drained from their FA partner, while the FA begins to feel emotionally starved. The FA's need to be understood constantly clashes against the DA's need for peace and harmony, thus creating the painful FADA conflict cycle. For the dismissive avoidant, conflict is the last thing in the world they want to engage in. They see it as a necessary drama, and they don't do drama. Conflict activates their wound of defectiveness and completely disrupts their core need of peace and harmony. Their nervous system tends to go into the trauma response of fight or flight initially. They'll either quickly become defensive in order to quiet their internal shame of feeling defective, which is fight, or they'll stuff down and ignore what they're feeling to try and make the conflict go away, which is flight. Soon after, their nervous system goes into the trauma response of freeze, which is deactivation, dissociating from their partner and from the situation in order to avoid the painful feelings that are triggered when conflict arises. Like I said earlier, DA's nervous systems quite literally feel like they are dying when confronted with conflict because they were dismissed, ridiculed, sometimes even punished for their emotions as children. So they will often say or do whatever they can to just make it go away as fast as possible. Lots of times they'll just be like, I'm not doing this. I'm not putting up with your drama. I'm out. They don't know how to process their own feelings, let alone the feelings their fearful avoidant partner is bringing to them in a conflict. So they'll just totally shut down. This often looks like them physically removing themselves from the situation and doing something to distract themselves, like working, exercising, sleeping, yard work, video games, hanging out with their friends, anything to take them out of the present moment and provide their nervous system with relief and distraction. This is how they were conditioned to deal with their emotions when they were a child. So, isolation in the midst of conflict is what feels safest to them. When they feel as though enough time has passed and things should be blown over and forgotten about, that's when they'll return to their partner as if nothing ever happened. They will ignore their partner for hours and days at a time. Hopefully, you guys can agree that ghosting your partner mid conflict, regardless of their attachment style, is not cool at all. This only fuels the FA's emotions during the DA's away time. Remember, the FA's biggest attachment wound is the fear of betrayal. When the DA's innate reaction to conflict is to exit the situation and distract themselves with literally anything in order to avoid their feelings and their partner, essentially abandoning them, this activates the FA's betrayal wound like no other and totally disrupts their primary need of being seen, heard, and understood. So while the dismissive is off in their own world, dissociating from their emotions, the fearful is left to spiral internally and grow resentful. As you can imagine, things don't magically just go back to normal like nothing ever happened after the DA decides they're ready to resume the relationship. Because of their need to be seen, heard, and understood, the fearful avoidant can often be perceived as highly critical of their partner. Because of their acute sense of hypervigilance, they're constantly scanning their partner for anything that could be deemed as a betrayal, no matter how big or small. They also have an embedded negativity bias, searching for all the negative aspects of the relationship and honing in on them, totally ignoring the positive aspects. That's because this is what kept the fearful avoidant safe as a child. They were subconsciously conditioned to believe that love is unsafe and conditional. Those that love you will hurt you. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. For FAs, it's as if the positive aspects of their relationship go totally out the window because they're so focused on what can go wrong, will go wrong. This hypercritical trait is especially painful for the dismissive avoidant partner who already subconsciously believes they are innately broken. Even if the fearful tries to express how they feel in the least confrontational, critical way possible, DAs often view any type of feedback that isn't positive as criticism. In a conflict, fearfuls are often extremely fast emotional processors, and dismissives are slow emotional processors. They don't think quickly on their feet like FAs tend to do, which is another reason that DAs shut down and dissociate. They can't keep up with the emotional receipts that FAs drop on them, so they tend to just give up, which also reinforces their defectiveness wound. Sadly, they end up feeling stupid and outwitted a lot of times in an argument with their FA partner. Now, don't hear me wrong. I am not calling the dismissive avoidant stupid. That is just how they internally feel. As the fearful avoidant attempts to create connection with their DA partner through conflict, that pushes the DA further and further away. All the DA wants is peace and harmony. All the FA wants is to feel seen, heard, and understood. And this vicious conflict cycle continues until one of two things happens. Either the relationship just can't take it anymore and they break up, or they have the courage to, as Dr. John Deloney famously says, turn the lights on and turn the music off, which is a metaphor for confronting uncomfortable truths and making intentional changes in your life. Now, I told you guys at the beginning of this episode that there is always hope for anyone who finds themselves in the painful FADA relationship dynamic. The caveat: it takes both parties doing the work to climb out of this vicious cycle. The fearful and the dismissive both have to be willing to look in the mirror and recognize where each of them have fallen short and how critical it is to understand and care for the needs of their partner. Both the FA and the DA bring great, unique qualities to the relationship, but they also bring plenty of their own shortcomings too. As long as each partner is willing to take accountability for their attachment shortcomings and put in the work to help meet the needs of one another, the fearful and the dismissive have just as good a shot as any other attachment dynamic to not only make it, but to turn their love story around to something beautiful once again. Now, you're probably wondering what the heck happened between me and my dismissive avoidant partner. Well, unfortunately, only one of us was willing to look in the mirror and make the necessary changes in order to save our relationship. I hate to say it, but it usually is the fearful avoidant that's willing to fight for things in this dynamic. Again, we're the ones who developed grit and resiliency, and we bring those traits into our romantic relationships. By the time I discovered attachment theory and tried to share this life changing stuff with him, his attachment wounds in the relationship were triggered past the point of him wanting to make things work. And it was apparent that he'd been slowly deactivating and withdrawing from me for several months. When we had our final fight, it was his way out that he'd been searching for because he didn't want to have to make any changes. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not claiming to be perfect in the relationship at all whatsoever. Remember, I just got done talking about the not great traits of the FA when it comes to conflict, right? But could we have made it for the long haul had he also been willing to change? Maybe. But it can't just be one person sacrificing themselves in order to salvage a relationship. If both parties are on board, though, then you have a fighting chance to make the FADA relationship combo a success. Like I mentioned earlier, this is exactly what Dr. Sarah Hensley's hybrid group coaching program is all about. Oftentimes, her program is a couple's last resort to stay together because usually they've tried everything else. And she's seen hundreds of FADA relationships totally transformed and restored by taking her hybrid group coaching program. So, again, if you find yourself here desperately wanting to figure out what it takes to heal your attachment and your relationship once and for all, head to thelovedoc.com and use the code Chelsea10 at checkout to get 10% off Dr. Hensley's life changing attachment healing programs and services. If this episode hit home for you, just know you're not alone. I hate to admit it, but I'm still healing from my failed FADA relationship. Do you know anyone who might be in this painful relationship combo? If so, do them a favor and share this episode with them. Had I not learned about attachment theory just a few months prior to my breakup with my dismissive avoidant, I am telling you with my full chest, I don't know where I would have ended up mentally and emotionally. I know the Lord put attachment theory in front of my eyeballs on social media when He did for a reason. I would be a wreck wondering, what the heck is wrong with me? Why am I not enough? Why wasn't I worthy of His love and Him wanting to fight for us and to change? That would be the story on repeat in my brain had I not learned about attachment and understanding that for the dismissive avoidant, it's a capacity issue, not a matter of me being worthy of his love. So please do your friends, your family, your neighbor, your coworker, whoever in your life a favor and share this podcast with them. You never know what people are truly going through on the inside, and I can confidently say that God used attachment theory to help heal me from what was undoubtedly the biggest heartbreak of my life. And because of all the self reflection and work I've done over the last year, I'm going to be the best version of me for the person who does have the capacity to love me the way that I know I deserve. And you deserve that too. All right, guys, this was an emotional one. I could keep going, but this is a solid stopping point. For our next episode, I am so ecstatic to welcome our first ever couple to the Attachment Confessions. Keisha and Taylor will be joining us to share the realities of their own fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant relationship. They've experienced some major trials and tribulations over the years and have been caught in the FADA conflict cycle. But after having recently discovered attachment theory and learning about each of their own attachments as well as each other's, what was once a painful relationship hanging on by a thread is now on the road to healing. So you will not want to miss their story. They are a true testament of how the FADA relationship can work when both parties are down to do whatever it takes to thrive. Keisha reached out to me on Instagram initially under the impression that she was an anxious preoccupied, thanks to online attachment quizzes getting the results wrong. So, I am still looking for an AP to come on the show and share your story. So, hit a sister up, please. Until next time, I wish you all happy attachment healing, and I'll see you right here in a couple weeks on the Attachment Confessions. Love you guys. Bye.